The observation ship Vatron drifted in high orbit above Earth, its hull blending seamlessly into the inky darkness of space. Below, the vibrant blue-green planet spun in serene indifference, its atmosphere a swirling tapestry of clouds and light. Commander Ralvek stood at the central console, his long, scaled fingers tracing the edges of a holographic map. The glow from the display cast a ghostly sheen over his angular face, highlighting the faint ridges that rippled down his jawline. "Report," he demanded, his voice a low growl that resonated through the silent observation deck. Sub-Commander Ethrek, a smaller figure with deep-set, multifaceted eyes, approached cautiously. "Commander, the drones have begun transmitting live footage of the surface. Preliminary observations suggest complex ecosystems and organized species hierarchies. However," he hesitated, his mandibles twitching nervously. Ralvek's gaze snapped to him. "However what?" "There's something unusual," Ethrek admitted, activating a secondary hologram. The image shifted, focusing on a lush, suburban neighborhood. The view swooped low, past rows of neatly trimmed lawns and colorful gardens, before settling on a modest backyard. There, amid the gentle rustle of trees and the chirping of birds, a sleek black and white creature stalked the shadows. Ralvek frowned. "What is that?" Ethrek magnified the feed. The creature's movements were unnervingly precise, every step calculated, its muscles coiled like taut springs. It crept low to the ground, eyes locked on a small bird perched unsuspectingly on a low branch. The bird flitted nervously, sensing danger too late. With a blur of motion, the creature lunged, a silent arc of fur and claws. The bird didn't even cry out. 1 second it was there, the next it was gone. The observation deck was deathly quiet. Even the hum of the ship's system seemed muted as the scene played out on the hologram. "What manner of predator is this?" Ralvek muttered, his voice a mix of awe and unease. "Replay the footage." Ethrek obeyed, his clawed fingers trembling slightly. The scene played again, slower this time. The creature's precision was unnerving, its strikes unerringly lethal. As the hologram zoomed in on its face, the sharp, unblinking eyes glinted like polished obsidian. "That is not a mere animal," Ralvek declared, his tone hardening. "That is a predator, perfected." "Commander," Ethrek said hesitantly, "our records indicate this creature is called a cat, a domestic species maintained by the dominant life form, humans." "Maintained?" Ralvek sneered, his scales bristling. "You call this domination? That creature exhibits no subservience. It hunts with the precision of a tactical strike team and the cold indifference of a machine." Ethrek tapped the console, bringing up additional footage captured by other drones. Cats in different settings, lounging on fences, pouncing on rodents, climbing trees with effortless grace. One particularly vivid clip showed a ginger tabby staring down a much larger canine, its fur bristling as it hissed. The dog, despite its size, backed away. "They appear to command significant influence," Ethrek murmured. Ralvek straightened, his gaze hardening. "This changes everything." He turned to the ship's communications officer, who had been silently watching the display. "Send this to the Council," he ordered. "All of it. Mark it as high priority. Earth's dominant species may not be what we assumed." On Earth, Whiskers stretched lazily under the dappled sunlight streaming through the backyard fence. The cat's black and white fur gleamed, meticulously groomed after her morning hunt. She licked her paw delicately, her ears twitching at the faint rustle of leaves overhead. Unseen by her, a cloaked drone hovered high above, its lenses focused intently on every flick of her tail. Its sensors whirred softly, recording every detail: heart rate, muscle movement, the faint shift of her whiskers in the breeze. Whiskers yawned, showing a row of pristine, razor-sharp teeth. "Do you see that?" Ralvek's voice crackled over the drone's relay. Back on the Vatron, he leaned closer to the display, his eyes narrowing. Even in repose, it exudes an aura of control. Observe how the other creatures maintain their distance. Indeed, the yard was still. A squirrel perched on a nearby branch froze mid-chew, its beady eyes locked on Whiskers. A sparrow fluttered briefly but landed farther away. Even the distant sound of a barking dog seemed subdued. "It's not just a predator," Ralvek continued. "It's a ruler." The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with activity as Ralvek's transmission played on the central display. Representatives from dozens of species leaned forward in their seats, their expressions ranging from fascination to horror. The footage of Whiskers pouncing on her prey looped endlessly, interspersed with slow-motion analyses of her hunting techniques. "Commander Ralvek," an elder representative intoned, her voice echoing in the grand hall. "Are you suggesting that these creatures, their cats, are the true rulers of Earth?" "I am not suggesting," Ralvek replied, his image projected as a hologram in the center of the chamber. "I am stating it as fact. The evidence is undeniable. The humans serve them, providing food, shelter, and protection. They bow to these predators, just as lesser species bow to their superiors." A murmur rippled through the assembly. "Furthermore," Ralvek pressed, "if the humans possess such alliances with creatures of this caliber, we must consider the implications for interstellar diplomacy. To approach them without understanding their hierarchy could be catastrophic." Miles away, Captain Elias Vorn sat in the observation lounge of Earth's orbital station, a steaming cup of coffee in his hand. The faint aroma of roasted beans mixed with the sterile tang of recycled air. He glanced out the viewport, his brow furrowing as he watched the distant shimmer of the Vatran. "What do you think they're doing up there?" asked Lieutenant Davis, seated across from him. Elias sipped his coffee thoughtfully. "Observing, no doubt. They always do before first contact. Studying us, trying to understand how we tick." "They've been up there for weeks," Davis noted. "What's taking them so long?" Elias shrugged. "Maybe they're just being thorough." His communicator chimed before he could take another sip. The crisp voice of Admiral Greaves cut through the room. "Captain Vorn, report to command immediately. Priority briefing." Elias set his coffee down, a faint sense of unease prickling at the edges of his mind. "On my way." Back on the Vatran, Ralvek watched as the footage continued to play, now accompanied by analyses of feline behavior. His jaw tightened as he replayed Whiskers' pounce for the third time. "This is not an enemy to be underestimated," he muttered. "If humanity has chosen to ally itself with such creatures, it speaks to their cunning and their threat." He turned to Ithrek. "Begin preparations for an official report. The Council must be made to understand what we're dealing with." "And if they don't?" Ithrek asked quietly. Ralvek's eyes gleamed coldly. "Then we ensure they do." In the shadowed recesses of Earth's backyard, Whiskers finished grooming her paw, stretched luxuriously, and leapt effortlessly onto the fence. She perched there, surveying her domain with unblinking eyes. To the aliens, she was a predator. To the humans, a beloved companion. To herself, she was simply Whiskers, and the galaxy had no idea what was coming. Elias Vorn stepped into the command room with an air of calm determination, though his mind churned with unanswered questions. The space was alive with muted energy, officers hunched over glowing monitors, low murmurs exchanging data, and the constant hum of Earth's orbital station reverberating underfoot. Screens along the walls displayed swirling feeds of the Galactic Council's latest observations, each frame more bizarre than the last. On one monitor, a sleek black-and-white cat, Whiskers, Elias presumed, leapt from a fence with uncanny precision, her movement a blur of efficiency. On another, footage from alien reconnaissance drones dissected her hunting patterns with unsettling detail, overlaying her every pounce with annotations and red-flagged warnings. "Admiral Greaves," Elias greeted, his voice steady. The older man turned, his sharp gray eyes narrowing as he gestured for Elias to join him by the main console. The air carried the faint scent of heated circuits and sterilized metal, a sharp reminder of the tension gripping the station. "We've got a situation," Greaves said, his tone clipped. "The Council's been watching us for weeks, but something's changed. Their observation team just transmitted an emergency priority report, labeling Earth's ecosystem as unstable." Elias frowned. "Unstable? Based on what?" Greaves tapped the console and the screen shifted to display a close-up of Whiskers, her unblinking gaze piercing the camera lens. Even frozen in time, the image carried a predatory weight, her pupils narrowed to slits, her ears angled sharply forward. "Based on this," Greaves said grimly, "they think these creatures, our cats, are apex predators, rulers of Earth." Elias stared at the screen, disbelief flickering across his face. "You're telling me they think humans are subordinate to our pets?" Greaves nodded, his mouth a tight line. "To them it's not just plausible, it's terrifying. They believe we've allied ourselves with an apex predator so lethal that even other species bow to it." The absurdity of the claim hung heavy in the air, yet Elias could see the unease in the room, the way officers avoided eye contact with the footage as though Whiskers might leap from the screen. He turned back to Greaves. "What's their next move?" "They've convened an emergency session to discuss Earth's status," Greaves replied. "And you've been summoned to address it." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Summoned? Not invited?" Greaves smirked humorlessly. "When aliens think you're keeping apex predators as pets, they don't exactly roll out the welcome mat." The room fell quiet as Elias processed the information. Whiskers' image loomed larger than life on the screens, her presence an almost tangible force. He could feel the weight of the Council's gaze through the data feeds, their fear coiled tight like a spring. "All right," Elias said finally, his voice steady but low. "Let's not waste time. If they want to talk, I'll make them listen." The Galactic Council's chamber was a monolith of shimmering metal and ethereal light, its towering arches carved from an alien alloy that refracted the dim glow of 1,000 holograms. Elias stepped into the hall, his boots echoing against the polished floor. The air here was dense, carrying a faint metallic tang, as though even the atmosphere bore witness to the gravity of the discussions held within. Before him, the Council representatives sat in a semicircle, their varied forms a kaleidoscope of galactic life. From insectoid diplomats with translucent wings to towering reptilian figures wreathed in ceremonial armor, each species carried its own distinct presence. At the center of the assembly, Commander Ralvek loomed, his scaled form rigid with authority. "Captain Vorn," Ralvek greeted, his voice carrying the sharp edge of a blade. "We appreciate your cooperation in attending this session. The Council is eager to understand the precarious situation unfolding on your world." Elias inclined his head, his expression unreadable. "I'm here to clarify any misunderstandings." Ralvek's eyes narrowed. "Misunderstandings? Our observations speak for themselves." He gestured to the central hologram, which flickered to life with footage of Whiskers in motion. The video played at half speed, capturing every sinewy movement as she stalked, pounced, and subdued her prey. Data overlays flashed alongside her, calculated trajectories, muscle efficiency, reaction times. "This," Ralvek said, his voice rising, "is a predator beyond compare. Its agility, precision, and lethality are unmatched. And yet your species shelters them, feeds them, serves them. What are we to infer, Captain?" Elias held his ground, the weight of the chamber pressing against him. "What you're seeing is a domesticated species," he said evenly. "Cats have lived alongside humans for millennia. They are companions, not rulers." "Companions?" one representative scoffed, their many eyes blinking in unison. "The footage suggests otherwise. These creatures exhibit no signs of dependency. They are hunters, apex predators, and you, humans, are their enablers." A ripple of agreement murmured through the assembly, and Ralvek's lips curled into a thin, predatory smile. "Captain Vorn, your claim of coexistence fails to explain the evident hierarchy. These creatures dominate your ecosystems. They command other species through fear. If this is what your planet produces, then the galaxy has reason to fear you." Elias's jaw tightened, but he forced himself to remain calm. "With respect, Commander, I believe you're misinterpreting what you've observed. Humanity's strength doesn't lie in predation. It lies in cooperation. Our species thrives not because of dominance, but because of adaptability and alliances." Ralvek's expression darkened, his scaled brow furrowing. "And yet, your so-called alliances appear dangerously one-sided." If you have truly allied yourselves with such predators, what does that say about your intentions toward the galaxy? The chamber buzzed with tension. Elias could feel the eyes of every representative on him, their unease thickening the air. He took a deep breath, his mind racing. He needed a strategy, a way to shift the narrative before Ralvek's fear-mongering gained more traction. "Let me propose a demonstration," Elias said suddenly, his voice cutting through the noise. The chamber fell silent, all eyes snapping to him. Ralvek arched a scaled brow. "A demonstration?" Elias nodded. "I'll show you firsthand the relationship between humans and cats. You'll see that they're not rulers or apex predators. They're companions, an integral part of our culture, yes, but far from the threat you perceive." Ralvek sneered, his voice dripping with skepticism. "And what do you hope to prove, Captain? That your species tames monsters?" Elias met his gaze without flinching. "I hope to prove that humanity isn't a threat to the galaxy. We're an asset." The chamber erupted into murmurs, some skeptical, others intrigued. Ralvek's sneer deepened, but he nodded begrudgingly. "Very well, Captain. You'll have your chance. But be warned, if your demonstration fails, the Council will have no choice but to act preemptively to protect itself." As the session adjourned, Elias stepped away from the podium, his heart pounding despite his calm exterior. He knew the stakes were higher than ever. Earth's future now rested on his ability to outmaneuver Ralvek's paranoia and prove humanity's worth. Back aboard the orbital station, Elias sat alone in his quarters, the faint hum of the ship's systems filling the silence. He pulled up the footage of Whiskers, watching as she leapt gracefully onto a windowsill, her tail flicking with contentment. For a moment, he let out a quiet laugh. "You don't even know the trouble you've caused," he murmured. But beneath the humor, a grim determination settled in his chest. The galaxy's fear of humanity was misplaced. But it was fear all the same, and fear, if left unchecked, could burn worlds. Elias Vorn stood on the observation deck, the vastness of Earth visible through the curved glass. The glow of cities twinkled like distant constellations across the surface, serene and oblivious to the storm brewing far above. The hum of the orbital station resonated faintly, a pulse of life that seemed almost mocking in its steadiness. Tension coiled in his chest, every breath weighed down by the knowledge that time was slipping away. Behind him, Lieutenant Davis entered, his steps quick but deliberate. The door's hiss cut through the stillness, pulling Elias from his thoughts. "Captain, we've got a situation," Davis said, his voice laced with urgency. He handed Elias a data pad, its screen flashing with alerts. The faint scent of coffee clung to Davis, a stark contrast to the metallic sterility of the station. "You're going to want to see this?" Elias scanned the report, his eyes narrowing as he read. The Council wasn't waiting. A covert strike team had been deployed to Earth, their mission clear: capture a specimen. Whiskers wasn't just a subject of observation anymore. She was a target. "They've landed already?" Elias asked, his voice a low growl. "Coordinates place them near the suburbs where the original footage was taken," Davis confirmed. "They're cloaked, but ground surveillance picked up distortions in the atmosphere." Elias cursed under his breath. He could picture the chaos that would ensue if the team succeeded, their capture of Whiskers only amplifying the Council's paranoia. Worse, if the operation went sideways, Earth would be left to face the fallout of an interstellar incident. "Alert the ground team," Elias ordered, his tone sharp. "They need to intercept before this spirals out of control." Davis hesitated. "What about the Council? If we intervene directly—" "They've already crossed the line," Elias interrupted. "We're not letting them abduct an innocent creature under our noses." On Earth, the night was alive with a quiet hum of crickets and the occasional rustle of leaves. Whiskers perched on the wooden fence, her tail flicking lazily as her sharp eyes scanned the yard. The cool breeze carried faint scents of grass, damp earth, and the subtle musk of nearby wildlife. But then came a shift, a vibration too faint for human ears, but well within Whiskers' range. Her ears twitched, swiveling toward the disturbance. The shadows near the far end of the yard rippled unnaturally, bending as if refusing to obey the laws of light. Whiskers narrowed her eyes, her body tensing. From the cloak of distortion stepped three alien figures, their forms sleek and angular, their movements unnervingly fluid. Their suits emitted a faint rhythmic hum, a sound too alien to blend into the natural world. One raised a scanning device, its green light sweeping the area. "Target confirmed," the lead figure murmured in a guttural language, the words lost to the night, but captured by the translator embedded in his suit. Whiskers didn't wait. With the grace of a shadow, she leapt from the fence, landing silently in the soft grass. The aliens turned, their scanners struggling to track her swift, erratic movements. Whiskers darted under the bushes, her heart steady, her instincts honed over generations of evolution. "There!" one of the aliens barked, pointing as a flicker of movement betrayed her position. They advanced, their steps cautious but purposeful, unaware they were walking into her trap. As the lead alien crouched to scan beneath the foliage, Whiskers struck. A blur of claws and fangs, she lunged, her attack precise. The alien stumbled back, his scanner tumbling from his hands. His companions rushed to assist, but Whiskers had already vanished, retreating into the night like a wraith. "Hostile behavior detected," another alien muttered, recalibrating his equipment. "Proceed with capture protocols." The rustle of leaves was their only warning before Whiskers reappeared, her eyes gleaming like twin stars. She feinted left, then bolted right, her speed rendering their movements clumsy in comparison. Each step was deliberate, every leap calculated, but even Whiskers had limits. As the aliens adjusted their tactics, encircling her with precision, her avenues of escape narrowed, her tail twitched with suppressed tension as she calculated her next move. Miles above, Elias paced the station's command center, the tension thick enough to choke on. Reports from the ground team came in bursts, each one painting a picture of escalating danger. "They've engaged the target," Davis relayed, his fingers flying over the console. "Whiskers is evading capture, but they're adapting." Elias clenched his fists. He could feel the weight of responsibility pressing against him, a tide threatening to drag him under. This wasn't just about a single cat. It was about Earth's place in the galaxy, about proving humanity's ability to navigate this volatile first contact. "Deploy the drones," he said finally. "Non-lethal deterrence only. We can't risk harming their team, but we need to give Whiskers an opening." Davis hesitated, then nodded. "Understood." Back on Earth, the night sky shimmered briefly as the drones descended, their sleek forms nearly invisible against the darkness. Soft pulses of light illuminated the ground, disorienting the aliens without causing harm. Whiskers seized the opportunity, darting through the confusion with feline agility. The lead alien growled in frustration, his movements sharp and jerky. "We're being interfered with," he snarled. "This operation is compromised." As the team regrouped, the drones hovered silently, their presence a reminder that Earth wasn't as defenseless as the Council might have believed. Whiskers, now safely perched atop a tree, watched the scene with unblinking eyes, her tail swaying in a slow, deliberate rhythm. The aliens retreated, their forms fading back into the distortions from which they'd emerged. Whiskers remained still until the last ripple of their departure faded into the night. Only then did she descend, her steps light, her composure unshaken. Elias leaned against the console, the adrenaline in his veins refusing to dissipate. The ground team's report confirmed the aliens' withdrawal, but the implications of their actions lingered like a shadow. "This isn't over," Davis said quietly, his voice mirroring Elias's thoughts. "No," Elias agreed, his tone resolute. "It's just beginning." He turned to face the room, his gaze sweeping over the officers gathered there. "The Council's fear is driving them to act recklessly. If we don't address this head-on, we'll lose control of the narrative." "What's the plan?" Davis asked. Elias exhaled slowly, his mind already calculating. "We give them the truth, a demonstration they can't ignore, one that dismantles their misconceptions and forces them to see us for who we really are." The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over the team. Above the hum of the station, Elias's voice cut through with quiet determination. They've seen what they fear. Now we'll show them what they should trust. As the station's lights dimmed for the night cycle, Elias stood alone, staring out at the vast expanse of space. Somewhere out there, the Council deliberated Earth's fate. And somewhere below, a single cat unknowingly carried the weight of an entire planet's future. The command room was eerily silent as Elias Vorn stood before his team, his reflection faintly visible in the polished surface of the table. The hum of the orbital station seemed louder in the absence of conversation, filling the room with a rhythmic drone. The faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee lingered in the air, mingling with the metallic tang of electronics running at full capacity. Outside, Earth spun serenely, oblivious to the storm brewing above. Elias drew a deep breath, the weight of the moment settling squarely on his shoulders. His eyes swept over the faces of his officers: Davis, his steadfast second; Commander Amina Solis, a tactical genius with an analytical mind; and Dr. Lynn Evers, their cultural and behavioral expert. Each carried the same tension in their expressions, their movements deliberate and restrained. "We're out of time," Elias began, his voice steady but laced with urgency. "The Council sees Earth as a threat, and if we don't act decisively, they'll escalate. Their strike team's failure will only deepen their fears." He tapped a button on the console, and a holographic image of the Galactic Council chamber appeared, its massive vaulted ceiling and ornate architecture a stark contrast to the cold, sterile functionality of their own room. "The Council convenes tomorrow," Elias continued, his tone sharpening. "Ralvek has undoubtedly framed the incursion as evidence of our aggression. We need to show them something different, something they can't refute." Commander Solis leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. "A demonstration?" "Exactly," Elias confirmed. He swiped his hand through the air, and the hologram shifted to display a series of interconnected screens. Each depicted a key element of their plan: live footage from Earth, curated historical data, and Whiskers' movements recorded in real time. "They've seen Whiskers as a predator," Elias said. "Now we show them what she truly represents: our ability to coexist, to form bonds not through dominance but through mutual respect." Dr. Evers frowned, her brow furrowing as she studied the data. "But they've already misinterpreted her behavior. How do we reframe their perspective without it seeming like an elaborate ruse?" Elias nodded, acknowledging the challenge. "We lean into the truth. We demonstrate humanity's innovation, our adaptability, and most importantly, our capacity for trust. Whiskers will be part of the narrative, but she won't be the focus." He turned to Davis. "Prepare the footage. I want every angle of her interactions with humans, playful moments, companionship, even the quirks that show her independence. Pair it with examples of our achievements in diplomacy, technology, and collaboration." Solis gestured to the tactical overlay. "And the live demonstration?" Elias's lips pressed into a thin line. "We bring Whiskers to the Council chamber." The room erupted in murmurs of disbelief, Solis leaning back in her chair with an incredulous look. "You want to bring her into that environment? With every representative watching, ready to interpret her every move as a threat?" "Yes," Elias said firmly, "because the moment they see her for what she truly is, their narrative falls apart. It's a risk, but it's one we have to take." Evers hesitated, then spoke cautiously. "And if something goes wrong?" Elias met her gaze, his expression resolute. "Then we're prepared to own it. No half measures, no hedging. If we want them to trust us, we have to trust ourselves." The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with anticipation as representatives filled the tiers of seating, their voices blending into a cacophony of tension and skepticism. The air was heavy with the sharp, acrid scent of burning incense, a ceremonial gesture meant to purify the space, though it seemed only to accentuate the unease. At the center of the chamber stood Ralvek, his imposing figure framed by the intricate carvings that adorned the podium. His scales gleamed under the chamber's soft, refracted light, his presence commanding as he prepared to speak. "Esteemed representatives," Ralvik began, his voice resonating with authority. "We gather today under the shadow of uncertainty. The species known as humanity has demonstrated behaviors that demand our vigilance. Their alliances with predatory creatures raise questions not only about their intentions, but about the very nature of their civilization." He gestured to the holograms behind him, which flickered to life with scenes of Whiskers' hunting prowess. The slow-motion footage captured every leap, every swipe of her claws, her efficiency framed as a calculated display of dominance. "These are not the actions of a mere companion," Ralvik continued. "They are the instincts of an apex predator, one that humanity has not only embraced, but empowered." As murmurs spread through the assembly, Elias stepped forward from the shadows, his measured stride drawing the chamber's attention. Whiskers followed at his side, her movements calm and composed, her soft fur gleaming under the chamber's light. "Council representatives," Elias began, his voice carrying a calm authority, "I thank you for the opportunity to address these concerns directly. Humanity values its place in the galaxy and seeks only to build relationships based on trust and cooperation." Ralvik sneered. "And yet, Captain Vorn, your actions speak otherwise. You bring the very creature at the center of our fears into this sacred chamber." Elias's gaze didn't waver. "Because fear thrives in shadows, Commander. Let's bring it into the light." He gestured to Whiskers, who sat gracefully at his feet, her tail curling around her paws. A murmur rippled through the chamber as she tilted her head, her green eyes scanning the crowd with curiosity rather than malice. "This," Elias said, his voice steady, "is Whiskers. She is a domestic cat, a species that has lived alongside humans for thousands of years. She hunts not out of malice but instinct, just as she plays, explores, and bonds with us out of mutual affection." He activated a hologram that displayed a montage of Whiskers' interactions with her human family, curling up on a couch, batting playfully at a dangling string, nuzzling a child's hand. The footage shifted to show humans working alongside animals in various settings, from conservation efforts to therapy programs. "What you see here is not dominance," Elias continued. "It's coexistence. Humanity's strength lies not in subjugation but in connection, in our ability to form bonds across differences and build something greater together." The chamber fell quiet as Elias's words settled over the assembly. Even Ralvik hesitated, his gaze flickering between Whiskers and the hologram. "And now," Elias said, his tone softening, "I invite you to see for yourselves." He extended a hand, and Whiskers rose, padding forward with quiet confidence. She approached one of the nearest representatives, a towering insectoid with shimmering wings, and stopped, gazing up at them with an expression of calm curiosity. The representative froze, then extended a delicate appendage. Whiskers sniffed it, then nuzzled against it, her purr a soft vibration that carried through the chamber. The moment was electric. The tension in the room shifted, replaced by a tentative sense of wonder. Whiskers moved to the next representative, her movements unhurried, her demeanor unthreatening. Each interaction chipped away at the council's fear, replacing it with understanding. Ralvik's voice cut through the quiet, sharp and defensive. "A well-rehearsed performance, Captain, but it does not erase the threat your species represents." Elias turned to him, his gaze unwavering. "Commander, fear clouds judgment. If humanity were truly a threat, we wouldn't be here seeking your trust. We'd be proving you right. Instead, we offer our actions, our history, and our willingness to connect as evidence of our intentions." He stepped forward, his voice rising with conviction. "We are not perfect. We are not without flaws, but we are a species that believes in the possibility of unity, in the power of understanding. Let this moment be the first step, not toward fear, but toward trust." The chamber was silent. Then, one by one, representatives began to nod, their expressions softening. The tide had turned, and Ralvik's grasp on the narrative slipped like sand through his fingers. Whiskers, oblivious to the weight of the moment, curled up at Elias's feet, her contented purring a quiet testament to the bonds that defined humanity's place in the galaxy. The chamber was still, save for the soft hum of distant systems and the faint, steady purring of Whiskers curled at Elias Vorn's feet. The tension that had gripped the room moments before now hung like a fading storm, leaving behind an almost eerie calm. Elias stood tall, his eyes scanning the gathered representatives, noting their shifting expressions. Where there had been skepticism and fear, there was now something new, curiosity, perhaps even respect. Ralvik broke the silence, his voice cutting through the stillness like a blade. "You believe this demonstration erases the danger your species represents? That we should simply accept your words and ignore the threat?" Elias turned to face him, his expression unreadable. "Commander Ralvik, I never asked you to ignore anything. Fear exists for a reason. It protects us, but unchecked fear blinds us to the truth. And the truth is, humanity's strength isn't in domination or destruction. It's in building bridges where others see only walls." He gestured toward Whiskers, who stretched lazily and began to clean her paw with an air of serene indifference. "This creature you fear so deeply, this apex predator, is a companion, a part of our families, our homes, our lives. She doesn't rule us, and we don't control her. We coexist, and that coexistence is a reflection of what humanity offers to the galaxy." Ralvik's jaw tightened, his scales rippling as he stepped forward. "Words are easy, Captain, but actions define species. Your people have already shown their capacity for war and expansion. Why should we believe that coexistence is your true nature?" Elias didn't flinch. He met Ralvik's gaze head-on, his voice calm but unwavering. "Because if it weren't, this conversation wouldn't be happening. If humanity were the monsters you fear, you wouldn't be standing here debating our intentions. You'd be standing on the ashes of a conquered world." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Several representatives exchanged glances, their postures relaxing. Ralvik, however, remained rigid, his fists clenched at his sides. Elias took a step forward, his voice softening, but losing none of its intensity. "I can't undo your fears, Commander. I can't erase the scars left by other species who have betrayed or harmed you. But I can tell you this. Humanity didn't survive centuries of conflict and adversity by turning inward. We survived because we learned to collaborate, to adapt, and to grow stronger together." He turned his attention to the rest of the chamber, his voice carrying the weight of conviction. "That's what we offer the galaxy. Not weapons or power, but partnership. We're not asking for trust without proof. We're offering it first." Whiskers chose that moment to leap onto the podium, her graceful movements drawing a collective gasp from the audience. She sat primly, her tail curling around her paws, as she fixed her unblinking gaze on the gathered representatives. The silence was palpable, every eye locked on the small, unassuming creature that had somehow become the embodiment of humanity's fate. Then slowly, one of the representatives, a towering being with silken plumage that shimmered in the light, stood. Their voice was melodic yet firm. "Captain Vorn speaks truth. His actions today show not the recklessness of a predator, but the wisdom of a species seeking unity. The Council should not let fear dictate our response." Another representative, an amphibious figure with glistening skin, nodded. "Agreed. Humanity's willingness to stand before us, to confront our doubts head-on, speaks volumes. This is not the behavior of a species seeking domination." One by one, others began to rise, their voices joining the growing consensus. Ralvik's expression darkened, his authority slipping through his grasp. He turned to the council elder presiding over the session, his voice desperate. "We cannot ignore the threat they represent. This is manipulation, nothing more than a carefully staged performance." The elder, a being with crystalline features that refracted the chamber's light, raised a hand for silence. Their voice was soft but resonant, carrying an undeniable weight. "Commander Ralvik, you have spoken at length of fear, fear of what humanity might become, fear of the alliances they may forge. But fear alone cannot guide our actions. Today, Captain Vorn has shown us a different side of humanity, one that seeks to build rather than destroy." Ralvik opened his mouth to protest, but the elder continued, their tone firm. "The Council will deliberate, but the evidence presented here carries great weight. Captain Vorn, you have given us much to consider." Elias inclined his head respectfully. Thank you, Elder. Humanity stands ready to work with the Council, not against it. The Elder nodded, signaling the adjournment of the session. As the representatives filed out, Ralvek shot Elias a look of pure venom before turning sharply and storming from the chamber. Hours later, back aboard the orbital station, Elias sat in the observation lounge, the glow of Earth casting a gentle light across the room. Whiskers lay sprawled across his lap, her purring a soft, rhythmic vibration that filled the quiet. Davis entered, a datapad in hand. The Council's verdict came in, he said, his voice careful. They've lifted the threat of quarantine. Earth is officially invited to begin formal negotiations for membership. Elias exhaled, the weight he hadn't realized he was carrying easing slightly. Good, it's a start. Davis hesitated. There's more. Ralvek's faction has been stripped of influence, but whispers of dissent remain. Some aren't convinced. They think we're playing a long game. Elias nodded, his gaze distant. Let them. Trust isn't built overnight. It's earned, piece by piece. Davis placed the datapad on the table, his expression softening. You did it, Captain. You proved them wrong. Elias glanced down at Whiskers, who blinked up at him lazily before curling tighter into his lap. We did it, he corrected. All of us, human and otherwise. As Davis left, Elias turned back to the viewport, his thoughts lingering on the challenges still ahead. Humanity had taken its first step into the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as partners. Yet the journey was far from over. Whiskers shifted, her tail flicking lightly against his hand. Elias smiled faintly, scratching behind her ears. You know, he said softly, you've caused a lot of trouble for someone your size. Her purring deepened, her eyes drifting shut. For all the chaos she'd inadvertently sparked, Whiskers remained blissfully unaware of her role in reshaping humanity's destiny. As the stars stretched endlessly before him, Elias felt a quiet certainty settle in his chest. The galaxy was vast and unpredictable, but humanity's greatest strength lay not in its weapons or its cunning, but in its ability to bridge divides and find common ground. They would face challenges, yes, but they would face them together. The universe didn't know it yet, but Earth's greatest weapon wasn't its predators or its technology. It was its heart.